Understanding the psychology behind why we love horror. The horror genre has always been a popular one, with people flocking to watch scary movies or read spine-chilling novels. But why do we enjoy being scared? What is it about horror that draws us in and keeps us coming back for more? In this article, we will explore the psychology behind why we love horror. One theory behind our love of horror is the concept of terror management theory. This theory suggests that our fear of death and the unknown leads us to seek out experiences that allow us to confront these fears in a controlled environment. By watching a horror movie, for example, we can experience fear and anxiety in a safe and controlled setting, allowing us to face our fears without any real danger to ourselves. Another theory suggests that our love of horror comes from our need for arousal. Arousal is a physiological state of heightened awareness and excitement. When we experience fear or anxiety, our bodies release adrenaline, which leads to an increased heart rate, rapid breathing, and a sense of alertness. This heightened state of arousal can be pleasurable for some people, leading them to seek out experiences that produce this response, such as watching a horror movie or going on a roller coaster. Additionally, horror can provide a sense of catharsis for some people. Catharsis is the release of pent-up emotions or energy, often through art or other forms of expression. Watching a horror movie can be a way to release feelings of fear or anxiety that may be bottled up inside, providing a sense of relief and release. Furthermore, horror can be a way to experience a sense of mastery or control over our fears. By watching a horror movie and seeing the characters overcome their fears and survive, we can feel a sense of empowerment and control over our own fears. This can be particularly appealing for people who feel powerless or out of control in their daily lives. Another aspect of our love for horror is the social and cultural factors that contribute to it. Horror movies and novels are a part of our cultural heritage, and watching them can be a way to connect with others and participate in a shared cultural experience. Additionally, horror can provide a sense of community and shared experience, as people may gather together to watch a scary movie or discuss a terrifying book. However, it is important to note that not everyone enjoys horror, and some people may even find it distressing or triggering. For some individuals, the experience of fear and anxiety can be overwhelming and may lead to negative psychological or emotional consequences. Additionally, some horror media may contain themes or content that can be harmful or offensive to certain individuals or groups. In conclusion, the psychology behind our love of horror is complex and multifaceted. From our need for arousal and catharsis to our desire for control and mastery over our fears, there are many factors that contribute to our enjoyment of horror media. However, it is important to remember that not everyone enjoys horror, and it is crucial to be respectful of individual preferences and boundaries when it comes to consuming this type of media. Our discussion about the social and cultural factors that contribute to our love of horror. As mentioned earlier, horror movies and novels are a part of our cultural heritage, and they play an important role in our socialization and upbringing. Many of us grew up with stories of ghosts, monsters, and other terrifying creatures, and these stories have become a part of our collective consciousness. Additionally, horror can be a way to explore and confront social and cultural anxieties. Horror stories often reflect the fears and anxieties of a particular time and place, and they can serve as a way to explore and address these concerns. For example, many horror movies from the 1950s and 1960s were about nuclear war and the fear of a nuclear apocalypse. Similarly, many horror movies from the 1970s and 1980s were about serial killers and the fear of violent crime. Horror can also be a way to confront our own mortality and the inevitability of death. By watching characters confront their own mortality and face death head-on, we can come to terms with our own mortality and find a sense of comfort and acceptance in the face of death. However, it is important to note that horror can also perpetuate harmful stereotypes and reinforce negative attitudes towards certain groups of people. For example, many horror movies have been criticized for their portrayal of women as helpless victims who are unable to defend themselves against violent attacks. Similarly, Horror movies have often portrayed people of color as savage and violent, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and reinforcing systemic racism. In conclusion, our love of horror is shaped by a variety of psychological, emotional, and social factors. From our need for arousal and catharsis to our desire for control and mastery over our fears, there are many reasons why we find horror media so appealing. However, it is important to be mindful of the potential harm that horror media can cause, and to be respectful of individual boundaries and preferences when it comes to consuming this type of media. Ultimately, our love of horror is a reflection of our complex and ever-evolving relationship with fear, anxiety, and the unknown. Another important aspect of our love of horror is the role that it plays in our entertainment and leisure time. Many people enjoy watching horror movies and reading horror novels as a way to unwind and escape from the stresses of everyday life. Horror can provide a sense of excitement and thrill that is difficult to find in other forms of media, and it can be a way to experience intense emotions and sensations that we might not otherwise encounter in our daily lives. Furthermore, horror can be a way to explore and confront our own inner demons and fears. By watching characters grapple with their own fears and anxieties, we can gain insight into our own psychological and emotional struggles. For example, many horror movies deal with themes of trauma, loss, and grief, and watching these stories can be a way to process and work through our own experiences of these emotions. In addition, horror can be a way to challenge our own assumptions and beliefs about the world. Horror stories often subvert our expectations and challenge our preconceived notions about what is possible or what is real. By exposing us to the unknown and the unexplainable, horror can be a way to expand our minds and broaden our understanding of the world around us. However, it is important to recognize that horror can also be a way to exploit and sensationalize real-life tragedy and trauma. For example, many horror movies and novels have been criticized for using real-life events, such as serial killer cases or natural disasters, as a backdrop for their stories. This can be seen as exploitative and insensitive to the victims and survivors of these events. Overall, the psychology behind our love of horror is complex and multifaceted, and it reflects our ongoing fascination with fear, anxiety, and the unknown. From our need for arousal and catharsis to our desire for entertainment and escapism, there are many reasons why we enjoy consuming horror media. However, it is important to be mindful of the potential harm that horror media can cause, and to be respectful of individual boundaries and preferences when it comes to consuming this type of media. Ultimately, our love of horror is a reflection of our own inner struggles and our ongoing search for meaning and understanding in a complex and unpredictable world.